There are a lot of intriguing transfer quarterbacks for the 2022 season. Most people are talking about Dillon Gabriel, Spencer Rattler, and Caleb Williams, but there's one guy who maybe is going a little bit under the radar, who at one time was seen as the future of college football. Yes, we're talking about JT Daniels, and in today's video, we're going to talk about expectations for him at West Virginia, how he got to this point, and my overall thoughts on him and the team. But before we can get into it, nearly 80% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel, and we can do better than that for the upcoming season, so be sure to subscribe, smash that like button for the algorithm, and turn on post notifications so you never miss a college ball video. Now let's get started. So yeah, JT Daniels is a pretty polarizing topic. It all started in the state of California, where he was groomed by his father to be a big-time quarterback. That is exactly what would happen, and once he got to Mater Dei High School, he really started to blow up. After a great 3 years there, he decided he was going to make the jump to college football, whether some thought he was ready or not. He decided to reclassify into the 2018 class. He joined the Mater Dei to USC pipeline, and expectations were super high for him. He'd get a chance to start right away, but honestly, he was not ready for college football. As a true freshman in 2018, he threw for 2,672 yards with 14 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. He only had a 59% completion percentage, and he didn't win a whole lot of games at USC either. To be fair, it was just a developmental year. The guy should have been a senior in high school, and it wasn't all that bad for someone who was only 18 years old. But excuses would be over in 2019, as he would now have to prove that he was an elite player. Well, he didn't really get much of a chance, to be honest. In their first game of the season, Daniels would go down with a knee injury, and he would be lost for the remainder of the year. He threw for 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Daniels probably would have been back in 2020, but his backup shined. His name is Kedon Slovis. Slovis was only a 3-star recruit coming out of the state of Arizona, and was one of those late rising quarterback prospects. Clay Helton decided to take a flyer on him, and it would pay off. Slovis would have an incredible freshman year, in which he would set USC records, and emerged as a 2022 NFL draft prospect. Unfortunately, Slovis would only regress during his next 2 years at USC, and at the same time, JT would find his new home. He would go across the country to Georgia. This was sort of a surprising move, but when you really took a look at it, it made sense. Georgia needed a new quarterback. They had just lost Jake Fromm to the NFL, so they'd have a couple guys to replace him. First, they brought in Jamie Newman. He was a guy who blew up at Wake Forest and was seen as someone that, if he was coached and developed right, could be a first-round pick or a dark horse Heisman contender. Georgia was sort of looking for a quick fix at quarterback, but Newman didn't even give it a chance. He decided to opt out of the 2020 season and prepare for the draft, in which he went undrafted. Unfortunate for him. So they looked to bring in another quarterback, and that guy was JT Daniels. The hype for him was pretty unreal, but then we found out he wasn't even going to play. He would still have to recover from his knee injury, and in his place, DeJuan Mathis and Stetson Bennett would battle it out for the starting job. We all know how that went. Mathis looked terrible in the first half against Arkansas, and Bennett came in and eventually won the job. He started a couple of games, notably struggling against Alabama, before JT was finally healthy. His first action would come in a game against Mississippi State, in which he threw for 401 yards and 4 touchdowns without a single interception. All of a sudden, people were scratching their heads wondering where this had been, as JT had the best game of his life in his first game in a Georgia uniform. From there, he was pretty solid. He threw for 2 touchdowns in a win over South Carolina, and then had a great performance against number 25 Missouri, as he threw for 299 yards with 3 touchdowns and once again, not a single interception. Georgia ended up having a great year, but because of their loss to Bama, they would be held out of the college football playoff. They would get matched up to play against number 8 Cincinnati, and that game was a thriller. The Bearcats controlled pretty much the whole way, but Daniels led the team back and threw for 392 yards and a touchdown, and they ended up winning 24-21 by way of a last-second field goal. In this game, we found out a couple of things. Daniels had the potential to be a big-time player in 2021, and Cincinnati had a chance to make a legitimate run in 2021. One of those would happen, and it wouldn't be the first. Daniels would have a huge Week 1 game, as they were matched up with Clemson. This was supposed to be a battle between JT Daniels and DJ Uiagalelei, and instead of it being a back-and-forth battle, it was more of a chess match. The only touchdown of the night would come in a pick 6, and Georgia would end up winning 10-3. It was a really weird game, and JT Daniels was not all that great. He went 22 of 30 for 135 yards with no touchdowns and a pick. He also once again showed that he had no mobility, as it seemed like in almost every single game during his collegiate career, he had lost yards, meaning he got sacked and couldn't run it. That was one of the issues we saw early on, as his mobility just wasn't there. But he would prove us all wrong just a couple weeks later. Against South Carolina, he'd go 23 of 31 for 303 yards and 3 touchdowns. He did throw an interception in that game, but he once again showed the potential he had. Against Vanderbilt, he threw 2 quick touchdowns before he would basically disappear for the remainder of the year. In came Stetson Bennett. Whether you love him or hate him, he was the starting quarterback for Georgia last year, and you gotta give him credit for always persevering and figuring out a way to get on the field. He now became the starting quarterback, the Georgia offense started to run the ball more, and their all-time defense didn't allow any other team to score. This basically made it seem like there were no issues and that it was all smooth sailing for Georgia. Daniels would not play much the rest of the season, and they're now in the driver's seat to getting to the college football playoff. Then they played Bama. This came in the SEC championship game, and while Bennett wasn't absolutely terrible, he was definitely struggling and the defense couldn't hold their own, and they needed a guy who could come in and give them a spark. Except Kirby never looked at Daniels. Every time Bennett would come to the sideline, JT was not frustrated or irritated, and he'd help him out. It was as if he knew his role, and he knew he wasn't going in the game. Kirby said he was confident in Stetson after that game, and despite them getting absolutely embarrassed, it seemed to never even cross Kirby's mind to put in Daniels. This caused a stir on social media, and Georgia fans were pretty frustrated as they didn't think Stetson could get it done. Luckily for Georgia fans, he did. Georgia put on a show against Michigan and eventually beat Bama in the national championship game to bring them their first title in what felt like an eternity. Bennett had a couple of good throws in that title game, but many were left wondering, why the heck did JT not see the field all year? As we go into 2022, Bennett announced he would use his extra year of eligibility in return. Daniels decided to get out. In 4 years, Daniels threw for 4,840 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 16 interceptions, and he also had his 5-star reputation, so there were plenty of schools who were at least going to give him a chance. Except where would he end up going? Well, it actually came down to 3 schools. First, it was Oregon State, second, it was Missouri, third, it was West Virginia. All of them seemed like somewhat viable options. Oregon State could always use a better quarterback, and they were on the West Coast, and he wouldn't have had a ton of pressure. That one made sense. Missouri was in the SEC, he'd be facing good competition, they needed a starting quarterback, and there once again would not have been a lot of pressure there. Thirdly, they had West Virginia. His former offensive coordinator from USC was now there, they needed a starting quarterback, and there was not going to be a lot of pressure there either. All of them seemed to have their benefits, but he would ultimately decide to go to West Virginia. As a Mizzou fan, I was a little bit bummed, but I'm really excited to see what he's going to do in Morgantown. Well, the quarterback situation in West Virginia has been pretty interesting over the last 10 years. It started with their superstar Geno Smith, and then they had some decent guys such as Clint Trickett and Skylar Howard. After that, you went to the Will Grier era, where he was a star there and ended up becoming an NFL draft pick, and then it's been slim pickings since. They grabbed big-time Oklahoma transfer Austin Kendall, but he didn't really perform. After that, you had Jarrett Dagey, who was at times great, but overall was underwhelming. Garrett Green was supposed to be this big-time name, but he has not yet put it all together, and then they also have another guy on the bench named Will Crowder. So going into the 2022 season, there was really a 4-man quarterback battle. You had Garrett Green, Will Crowder, JT Daniels, and incoming freshman Nico Marchiol. Marchiol originally committed to Florida State, but he flipped his commitment to Neil Brown at West Virginia, and he has a lot of hype for the future, but I think he's a little bit too young to play this year, and he's the guy of the future. It's going to come down to Crowder, Daniels, and Green, and from all indications, it looks like JT is going to be the starter. What's interesting is his first matchup is going to come against Pittsburgh, and who is he playing against? Keaton Slovis. If you remember right, he was the guy who took over for him in 2019 at USC, and both of their careers would slip as time went on, and they have both found new schools, and it's just interesting they're going to be playing against each other. So now we get to this part of the video where we talk about what I expect for JT this year. Well, first off, how the Mountaineers lost a good amount of offensive weapons. They only returned 2 of their top 6 receivers, and they lost their star running back Letty Brown to the NFL. They'll have to find a new running back, and they'll have to have some guys emerge at the receiver spot. There are 2 wide receivers in particular that I am looking to step up in a big way. The first one is Sam James. He's been in the program for a couple of years now, and he has shown flash at being a productive receiver, but has not put it all together yet. He needs to step up. Secondly, you have Bryce Ford Wheaton. He's another one of those players that has shown flash, but has not yet put it all together to become a top-end receiver. Both of them have the potential, as last year, those two combined for 84 catches, 1,080 yards, and 8 scores. There is a big group of players competing for that running back spot, but those players don't really mean much if JT isn't good himself. From everything else I've read, it really does seem JT is going to be the #1 quarterback, and we all know he has an arm and he has experience, but will he be able to stay healthy, and will he be mobile enough to avoid getting sacked a ton? That's a question I have, and combining that with the fact that he needs some guys to step up at receiver, I'm a little bit worried about it. I'm not saying JT is going to be a complete bust, but I also don't think he's going to be a superstar. I think he's going to be somewhere in the middle. I think he'll have a pretty average year, and hopefully he can last the whole season. If there's one thing we know, it's that he has not even played a full season in over 3 years, so I'm very interested to see about his durability. But what the heck do I know? I'm just an outsider. If you're a West Virginia fan, please let me know your thoughts down below. How good will JT Daniels be this year? Who is going to be the backup quarterback behind him? And what are your thoughts on Neil Brown and this year's team? If you're a fan of another school, let me know your thoughts as well. Give me another topic I could cover in my next video, and subscribe if you want more college football content. Also, don't forget to leave a like if you want to support the channel, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.